When Stephen exited the spatial rift, he found himself in the forest on the outskirts of Annapolis. He stepped into the lake to wash off the dirt and grime from the battle. The threadworms and the dragons joined him in the water. The chill washed away the lingering heat that clung to their bodies. Stephen had 2 days before he had to go back to the Elysian realm to hand in the Berserker's blessing at the auction house. He took a short break before heading to the research institute in the city. Dr. Dalton examined the eyeballs under a microscope. The pupils contracted and expanded rhythmically in response to visual stimuli. They functioned as regular biological organs. Dr. Dalton picked up the tray and inspected the eyeballs up close. He'd never seen such a strange life form before. He was itching to experiment with them. It was hard to imagine living beings in other dimensions going about their lives even after leaving their organs behind. His plans were cut short when Stephen retrieved the eyeballs and placed them in a goblet. "I need to bring these back." Dr. Dalton was disappointed, but he lit up when Stephen dumped a pile of ores and crystals into a container. They were from the Elysian realm. Ores of a higher plane contained more energy than lower-level spaces. Stephen was hoping Dr. Dalton and his team could use them to upgrade the artillery shells. Stephen went to find Thierry. He was sitting in the shade, enjoying the breeze. "You came back in one piece? I guess the Elysian realm isn't as dangerous as I thought." "Please stop joking around," Stephen said, exasperated. "The only reason I got this far is because the Dragon Clan's prophet made me a student." "That old man became your teacher? He must have seen the future and made you a student with his ulterior motive." Stephen almost blurted out that the prophet's real reason for helping him. He felt like he was caught between two cunning old men. He decided it would be better to bring up the medicinal fossils after the Mystic Covenant's recruitment was over. Stephen sat down and showed Thierry the eyeballs in the goblet. "What is this? People in the Elysian realm called it the Berserker's blessing." Berserkers were cultivators who existed in the Elysian realm more than 20,000 years ago. As their name suggests, they can enter a berserk state during battle. When they're in this state, their cultivation increases significantly. Their bodies return to normal after battle. It's like a stimulant without side effects. "Why didn't I hear about them when I was in the Elysian realm? Where are they now? Did they cross over to another realm?" No, they were obsessed with fighting and power. In the end, several factions worked together to annihilate them. There's no side effects when they enter the berserk state, but their rationality experiences varying stages of decline in battle. They're more susceptible to traps and tricks. Stephen thought back to the fight he had with the brawny man in the pyramid. The only reason he'd managed to escape so easily was because the man was in a berserk state and blinded by bloodthirst. "The team at the research institute told me these eyes are functioning normally, even though they're outside the body. Are they useful?" Thierry had never stolen such a disgusting thing before, so he wouldn't know. "If you're curious, why don't you test them yourself?" Before Stephen could react, Thierry reached inside the goblet, pulled out an eyeball, and placed it on his arm. Veins protruded from the back of the eye and penetrated Stephen's skin. A wild force surged within him. He felt an urge to unleash all of the martial arts techniques he'd learned in his lifetime. He had to vent his aggression to release his raging motions. Thierry condensed a translucent barrier around the area. "Don't attack blindly. Use your clarity to control the power. If you fall, you'll end up like the berserkers who lost their minds." Stephen attempted to gain control of the force inside him, but the sensation of thousands of needles piercing his brain was too overwhelming for him to focus. This was a side effect of the raging force. The eye was continuously supplying power, turning his body into a dam about to burst. To lessen the destructive urges, he retreated into his internal world. The landscape, including the sky and the ground, had turned black and white. His internal world reflected the chaos overrunning his body. The power rippled through the air and riddled the ground with holes. It would have been a disaster if life forms had been born only to be killed not long after. The iridescent dragon appeared next to him in the internal world. "Don't let the power control you. Use your reason to suppress it." Stephen was filled to the brim with chaotic energy. Containing this massive influx of power was beyond him. Thierry plucked the eyeball from Stephen's arm, severing its connection to his muscles. The pain brought him back to the real world. He'd experienced the life of a berserker, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to do it again. At least, not until he was ready. "Give one of these eyes to the auction house and keep the other for yourself," Thierry said. "Didn't you tell me not to provoke anyone? I'm done for if they find out. The prophet only gave me his necklace. I'm on my own for everything else." They've given this mission multiple times in the past, but no one has ever succeeded. Their information on the Berserker's blessing is limited to rumors. Just tell one of them the eye was destroyed in battle if they ask. As expected of the astral thief, his excuses were second to none. Stephen stored one of the eyeballs and packed the other into a container. He opened a spatial rift with his blade and went back to the Elysian realm. Theoretically speaking, nothing could be hidden from the prophet, but the number of times he could predict the future was limited. Each attempt consumed a lot of energy. If he overdid it, his life would be at risk. Stephen glanced at the Dragon Clan's castle. It was quiet. Maybe the prophet hadn't noticed he'd left the Elysian realm for a short time. He made his way to the city. The Amethyst auction house was like a silent exhibition hall where there was no auction. The valuables were placed in glass containers and put on display. It was open to the public. Anyone could walk in and take a look around. The receptionist was startled when Stephen walked in the door. "Aren't you the person who accepted the mission?" "Yeah, that's me." The volcano at the highest peak was dangerous, especially for ordinary people. Everyone thought Stephen had died a violent death. No one expected him to come back safe and sound in the middle of the night. "It's okay if you didn't succeed. Staying alive is what matters." "I'm actually here to hand in the Berserker's blessing," Stephen said. The receptionist was even more shocked than when he walked in. "I'll inform the manager immediately." 2 minutes later, a middle-aged man in a tuxedo came downstairs. He was the CEO of Amethyst Auction House. He led Stephen to his office on the top floor and treated him like a distinguished guest. He asked his secretary to prepare 2 cups of tea. Stephen placed the glass container with the eyeball on the table. With his permission, the CEO inspected the eye with his inner energy. The Berserker's power made him dizzy, and he staggered a few steps back. "This is the real thing. You've exceeded my expectations." "I was lucky. Miss Vivian from the Bellantine family and her team helped me out." It would attract too much attention if Stephen said he found the Berserker's blessing with his beasts. The Bellantine family was wealthy and powerful. It would be better to use them as cover. The CEO deposited the monetary reward into Stephen's bank card and gave him the invitation to the Mystic Covenant's recruitment. "You have a few months until the recruitment. Cultivate diligently with the time you have left. Luck won't help you on the battlefield." "Thanks for your advice." Stephen pocketed the invitation. Now he could bring Liam along to the recruitment. The mission of the Berserker's blessing had been hanging on the auction house's bulletin board for almost 6 years. Its sudden disappearance led to a heated discussion among the cultivators in the city. They asked around and discovered that a strange young man had appeared in the area recently. His cultivation was so weak that it was pitiful, but he'd signed up for a dangerous mission at the auction house and succeeded. If he wasn't the prophet's student, an endless crowd of people looking for trouble would be hunting him down. Stephen and his beast built another wooden house on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't that far from the Dragon Clan's castle. There was an abundance of spiritual energy in the forest, making it a suitable location for cultivation. Stephen spent his free time meditating, cultivating, and studying martial arts manuals. In a battle with the Senders, ordinary martial arts wouldn't suffice. He had to improve his techniques or learn new ones from either the manuals or the Book of Destiny. The book recorded information about his opponents, including their techniques. The iridescent dragon was sitting by the lake in its human form with its legs in the water. "Don't you need to prepare for Liam for the recruitment?" Stephen himself was having trouble breaking through to the true immortal realm. He wasn't knowledgeable or experienced enough to help Liam progress. He looked up from the manual he was reading. The threadworms and the dragons were basking in the sun in their human forms without a care in the world. "Why don't I give you the invitation? If we fight side by side, we're guaranteed to be selected." The iridescent dragon sprawled lazily on the grass. "I don't want to become a member of the expeditionary team. It's just an extra identity. It's boring and restrictive. You have to fight and kill. Beasts are cultivated differently from humans. Bloodline inheritance ensured their potential for growth. Improving their cultivation also followed a simple concept. All they had to do was consume other beings and obtain their cultivation." "What about the prophet?" Stephen asked. "Do you think he'd agree if I asked him to train Liam?" "He's a prophet. He's not suited for combat." "So you want Liam to learn fortune-telling?" "When there's a gain, there's a loss. In the Elysian realm, everyone sees the prophet as a mystical being. Divining the future is a rare ability." Footsteps along the grass interrupted their conversation. It was Vivian. Today, she was dressed in casual clothes. "Do you know how surprised I was when I heard you completed the mission?" It's thanks to you, Stephen said. My journey was a lot smoother with your people leading the way. His flattery didn't fool Vivian. Her bodyguards and mercenaries had left halfway up the mountain. They barely did a thing. Stephen had relied on his own skills to dive into the magma and retrieve the Berserker's blessing. She had a feeling that he was deliberately hiding his true capabilities. If you completed the mission, you're at least a bit stronger than my family's mercenaries. Can I ask you for a favor? It's nothing big. It should be easy for you. Little did Vivian know that compared to her family's bodyguards and mercenaries, Stephen was nothing but a weakling. He wasn't even an ascender, but he couldn't tell her that. Your family's influential. What can I do that they can't? The elders in the family are especially concerned about my marriage. They nag me on a daily basis. I'd like you to pretend we're in a relationship. There's no fighting involved. You just need to talk. Miss Vivian, are you joking? Your reputation is on the line. You're young. Why are you so old-fashioned? I'll pay you a high price for it. Vivian had sent her bodyguard to investigate Stephen's background. He didn't have a family. It was like he'd appeared out of thin air one day. The only explanation was that the prophet had acknowledged his potential and picked him up from somewhere. If he wanted to survive in the Elysian realm, status wasn't enough. He needed money. Her family could help him establish his own business in the city. Vivian's offer was generous. Without money, it was inconvenient to get around. Stephen's cultivation was worth nothing in the Elysian realm. Doing business and earning money was what he did best. The problem was, he was married. His beautiful wife was waiting for him at home, and she was the only woman in his heart. After debating with his inner turmoil, Stephen ended up reluctantly agreeing. I'll help you, but only for a short time. Don't make a big deal out of it. Vivian gave him a multifunctional phone and car keys. Don't worry, I'm just going to tell the elders. Take these. It'll be more convenient for us to contact each other. I'll arrange a family gathering soon. When the time comes, you'll have to show your face. Stephen sighed as he watched Vivian walk away. He apologized to Kim in his heart and promised this wouldn't happen again. The iridescent dragon was amused by his misfortune. Don't tell Kim about this, Stephen said with a glare. I'll tell her myself. When Vivian went home, she saw the oldest son of the Bowen family, Saddle Bowen, chatting with her father. She knew right away from the expression on his face that he was here to propose an engagement. The Bowen and Ballantine families were well matched in Minori City. They were both wealthy and influential. Her father waved her over, but she turned away. I'm busy. Her father got up and pulled her to the table. You're a lady of a big family, he whispered. Pay attention to your image. The least you can do is talk to him. Saddle smiled at her. Miss Vivian, a popular restaurant opened in the city recently. Would you like to come with me tonight? On any other day, Vivian would have rejected him curtly, but Stephen had become her cover. I'm sorry, I have a boyfriend. I wouldn't be able to accompany you. Saddle and her father were stunned. They gave her suspicious looks. Vivian's father knew his daughter well. It was only a few days ago when she declared she wasn't interested in marriage. Where did she suddenly find a boyfriend? Mr. Saddle is sincere. He's serious about marrying you. I'm also serious. My boyfriend's name is Stephen. The Dragon Clan's prophet is his teacher. Saddle had heard of Stephen before. His fame had skyrocketed in the city ever since he completed the Amethyst Auction House's mission. But there were also rumors that he was so weak that he couldn't withstand a single blow. You're an outstanding woman. It's not surprising that you have many admirers. Before we agree to an engagement, we should let others compete fairly. As the head of the family, Vivian's father valued long-term benefits. Although the title of the prophet's student held quite a bit of weight, the family business would be secure if they partnered with the Bowen family. Thank you for your marriage proposal. My daughter's decision is important to me. Let's call it a day and discuss this further another time. Saddle sensibly said his goodbyes and left, leaving the father and daughter pair alone in the living room. I need to make sure my future son-in-law is capable. Tell me everything you know about Stephen. I heard he survived the volcano and brought back the Berserker's blessing. Was he hiding his strength all this time? Vivian and Stephen hadn't discussed the details, so she couldn't answer such a sensitive question. I'll ask him to come over soon. You can have a chat with him then. We're all on the same side, so you can ask him anything. When Saddle left the mansion, his expression changed. He was the heir to the Bowen family. His family's business and their properties would become his in the future. If he married Vivian and had the support of the Bellantine family, his future would be limitless. Stephen's cultivation contradicts his achievements. Find an opportunity to test him. Saddles, bodyguards nodded and dispersed down the bustling street. They wandered the city, searching the streets and alleys, but there was no sign of Stephen. They expanded their search and couldn't believe their eyes when they finally found him on the outskirts of the city. He's living in the wilderness? Is he too poor to afford a home? I don't understand what Vivian sees in him. Maybe the prophet assigned him the task to help him learn survival skills. It doesn't matter. When the sun goes down, beat him up until he's half dead. When Vivian sees how weak he is, she'll end the relationship. In the evening, the bodyguards made their move. They sensed Stephen's cultivation. It was weak like the rumors. They didn't bother hiding their tracks. They walked up to him and made their presence known. One look and Stephen knew they weren't here for a friendly chat. Can I help you? Your achievements have spread far and wide in the city. As fellow cultivators, we would like to learn from you. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Luck played a big role. It doesn't seem like you have anything better to do, so let's spar. The leader of the bodyguards didn't have the patience to listen to excuses. He threw out his palm without waiting for Stephen's reply. The wind from a simple attack was so strong that Stephen could barely keep his eyes open. He stepped to the side and avoided it. He condensed a layer of iron sand on the ground using the threadworm's spiritual energy. The metallic fragments merged into sharp blades. The bodyguard shattered them with one sweep of his legs. Stephen followed up with a storm of icicles using the ice dragon's spiritual energy. They were sharper than swords, but it had no effect on the bodyguard. Can you take our spar more seriously? At this level, you wouldn't be able to get close to the volcano. You wouldn't have been killed by the phenomena on your way to the peak. In the past, the leader of the bodyguards had led his subordinates up the mountain to cultivate, so he had some understanding of this strange phenomena. Stephen didn't have a convincing explanation. He doubted they'd believe him if he'd bypassed the phenomena by asking the threadworms to dig a tunnel underground and survive the magma through sheer luck. The Book of Destiny had analyzed the bodyguards, but there was a gap between understanding and comprehending their techniques. Stephen's cultivation wasn't high enough to make use of this information. He resorted to threatening the bodyguards with his fake identity. The Dragon Clan's prophet is my teacher. The rules of the clan state that I'm not allowed to use violence unless it's absolutely necessary. The bodyguards exchanged nervous glances. If they forced one of the Dragon Clan's members to break their rules, they would make an enemy out of the entire clan, and the Bowen family would be in danger. Saddle's jealousy couldn't compare to the family. The leader of the bodyguards forced a smile. You're right. The Dragon Clan values peace and detests violence. It wasn't appropriate to ask you for a spar. Please don't hold this against us. We were only curious about your skills. With that, the bodyguards quickly disappeared into the depths of the forest, leaving Stephen confused by their sudden ambush. This part of the forest is secluded. We haven't seen anyone pass by except Vivian. How did they find us? Maybe they want the invitation, the iridescent dragon guessed. The Aerie stole one in secret, but you were rewarded out in the open. Everyone knows you have an invitation. If you don't want to be bothered, then move into the Dragon Clan's residence. You won't have to worry about anything. The other dragons will respect you because you're the prophet's student. Stephen adamantly refused. The prophet was well informed. If he moved into the castle, there'd be eyes on him at all times. The leader of the bodyguards led his team back to the city. He was in a dilemma. He couldn't disobey Saddle's orders, but he also couldn't go against his family's interests. Moreover, if they really did attack Stephen, the responsibility would fall on them, not Saddle. What's there to worry about? It won't take more than a few minutes to beat him half to death. Yes, but we can't hide this incident from the prophet. What if the Dragon Clan confronts our family? He's rarely involved in worldly affairs. He won't care as long as Stephen's injuries aren't too serious. Disguise yourselves and don't leave evidence behind. The bodyguards didn't have any more excuses and could only agree. Stephen lit a bonfire outside the wooden house to grill fish for dinner. I have a feeling those people from before will be coming back tonight. I told you to move into the castle, but you insisted on staying here. If they come after you, there's not much I can do. I can't jeopardize the Dragon Clan's neutral position. Even if the iridescent dragon wanted to help, it specialized in mental attacks. It didn't have much of an effect on the stronger cultivations in the Elysian realm. Stephen wasn't planning to fight anyone head-on. If push came to shove, he would run. The bushes rustled, indicating that Stephen's prediction was spot on. He slashed at the forest, and the trees toppled over from the wave of aura. 4 men in masks appeared around him. They were so fast that Stephen didn't see them until they were right in front of him. "Who are you? Are you sure you want to go against the Dragon Clan?" As he rambled empty threats, he flashed the prophet's necklace. His threats didn't work this time. Saddle's bodyguards were determined to fulfill their mission. They attacked without a word. Blades of light swept the clearing. Stephen relied on the predictions from the Book of Destiny and the ghost fire in his sword to narrowly avoid each strike. One slip-up and he'd be sliced to pieces. The bodyguards couldn't figure out how he was dodging their attacks when his cultivation was so low. The ice dragon stayed hidden beside Stephen's spiritual world and unleashed a gust of icy wind. The bodyguards' weapons froze, and they became too heavy for them to swing as nimbly as before. "Your cultivation isn't that high, but you have a lot of tricks up your sleeve. They won't save you during the competition. How about giving your invitation to us instead?" Their excuse coincidentally aligned with Stephen and the iridescent dragon's assumption that their assailants were here to steal the invitation. Stephen pierced the crack in the ground with the tip of his sword, and purple screens of light surrounded the masked men. The 4 of them stopped when they saw their reflections. "Something's not right. I sense a life force coming from those mirrors. Are they synchronized with our spiritual energy?" Stephen didn't give them time to analyze the technique. He shattered the screens with a wave of fire. The masked men suffered the same damage. Their skin melted from the heat, and bones peeked through their wounds. Their blood was vaporized before it could flow. Their injuries were severe, but it wasn't fatal to cultivators in the Elysian realm. The bodyguards forgot about Saddle's warning to leave Stephen alive. They were determined to kill him. They leaped into the air, and their figures blurred into one. Stephen sensed their general location, but he couldn't see them. The Tempest Citadel's secret technique wasn't that effective in the Elysian realm. It was time to run. He mounted the threadworms, and they slithered into the tunnel they dug beforehand. The bodyguards peered into the hole in the ground. If they gave chase, they'd have to continue their fight in a narrow space. There was no room to dodge. It would become a test of endurance. "We failed our mission, and we even sustained this many injuries. How are we going to explain it to the family when we get back?" "What else can we do? Tell the truth and receive our punishment. Saddle won't be able to do whatever he wants if the head of the family is home." The threadworm slithered through the tunnel and surfaced on the other side of the lake. Tonight's battle reminded Stephen that he was an ordinary person in the Elysian realm. The iridescent dragon appeared next to him. "Fighting isn't allowed in the city. If you don't want to move into the castle, then move to the city. Vivian is going to help you establish your business. You'll be moving to the city sooner or later." "I shouldn't have agreed to help her. Cultivating in the human realm is much safer." "Just put on a show. It's not that hard." Stephen decided that living in the city would be better than staying in the wilderness where anyone could ambush him. His bank card had enough funds to stay at the hotel. The next morning, Vivian paid him a visit. His hotel wasn't that far from the Bellantine family's mansion. "Do you have time tonight? My father wants to meet you." "Are you going to introduce me?" "My father's been a cultivator for over a century. He's not that easy to fool. I'll need to come up with a false identity for you, and we need to get our story straight so we don't expose ourselves. My future depends on your performance tonight." Vivian was worried that her father would follow through with his threat and freeze her cards. She couldn't live without her money. Stephen went along with her plan. He told her about the ambush last night and asked if she knew who was there. Vivian shrugged. "I don't know. The city's been at peace for decades. The wealthy families don't have conflicts with each other. My family's mercenaries haven't heard anything either. If you didn't complete that mission for the auction house, you wouldn't have attracted so much attention. Anyway, after tonight, you'll have the Bellantine family as your backer. There'll be few people to bother you. My family has a few shops in the eastern part of the city. They're under renovation. I'll give them to you in exchange for playing the part. What kind of business are you going to run?" "Jewelry." Vivian gave Stephen a skeptical look. He laid out the jewelry he'd prepared on the table. "My products are different from the competitors. They don't have fluctuations in energy." Vivian examined his jewelry. They were visually appealing, but they didn't have any value. Most jewelry in the Elysian realm was embedded with crystals and cores of beasts. They were useful in battle, making them beautiful and practical. "They're pretty, but they won't sell. I suggest you come up with another business proposal." "It doesn't hurt to try. If it fails, I'll sell something else." Stephen changed into a formal outfit and prepared to spend the rest of the evening at the Bellantine family's mansion. It was as grand and luxurious as a palace. The familiar atmosphere reminded him of the time he spent with the Adams and Cassidy families, the difficulties he'd gone through to become a distant memory of the past. Stephen was the prophet's student, and Vivian's father had to treat him as a distinguished guest regardless of his impression of him. As Stephen walked past the smiling staff, he couldn't help but notice that the interior of the mansion was much more extravagant than Garon's imperial court. When everyone was settled at the dining table, Vivian's father got down to business. "There have been many rumors about you on the streets lately. They say you're young and talented, and after meeting you in person today, I can tell they weren't exaggerating. You're the prophet's student, and you also completed the most difficult mission from the Amethyst auction house. But marriage isn't as simple as you think it is. Can you tell me about yourself?" Stephen nodded and repeated the story he and Vivian had prepared before coming. He was an orphan who encountered the Dragon Clan's prophet by chance when he was young. The prophet took him under his wing, and he'd been cultivating for more than 20 years in the castle until recently leaving home to gain experience. Vivian's father had instructed his subordinates to investigate Stephen's family, but they hadn't found any leads. Having a chance encounter with the prophet as a lucky wanderer was plausible. Vivian's father reached out his aura and confirmed that Stephen's cultivation was as weak as a fly. He couldn't possibly compare to Shaddle. "As you know, I'm the head of the family, and I have my priorities. I'm sure you're aware of our standing in this city." He hoped the hidden implication behind his words would encourage Stephen to back out. Vivian glared at her father. "Stop bullying him. He might not be worth much now, but I have high hopes for him." The father and daughter pair had reached a roadblock in their discussion, but they maintained their elegant and respectful tone as tensions rose. Stephen had said his piece, and he was no longer needed. He minded his own business and tasted the delicacies on the table. He downed one glass of wine after another. His lack of table manners aligned with his story of having no experience in the real world. Vivian's father didn't think Stephen had much going for him in terms of finances, so he set conditions relating to the cultivation aside. "Based on my observations, you haven't reached the stage of ascension. These things can't be rushed, but the strong are respected in our world. You must have the skills to protect my daughter." A cultivator's senses were sharpened as their cultivation increased. Most of the cultivators Stephen came across in the Elysian realm had seen through his cultivation with one glance. "I'm a cultivator with a low aptitude. I don't know how far I'll get, but I'll do my best to train diligently." Vivian's father took a sip of the wine to think. Stephen's responses were generic, but passable. He wondered if he used his way with words to trick Vivian into dating him. "Stephen has an invitation to the Mystic Covenant's recruitment," Vivian reminded him. "He'll be fighting on the world stage in a couple of months. At that time, everyone will have a chance to witness his skills firsthand. Let's forget about it for now and enjoy our dinner." "All right, if you selected to join the expeditionary team, then I'll approve of your relationship." The issue was temporarily put on hold, and Vivian had earned a few months of freedom. Stephen could finally focus all of his attention on the delicious food in front of him. A few days later, Stephen started his jewelry business, Harmonia Pavilion. Vivian had carefully selected a team of experienced staff to renovate the store. The exterior and interior had upgraded to a sleek modern design. The appealing decor attracted many customers. They visited the store, but no one made any purchases. The products were much more expensive than the standard price on the market. For example, a pink diamond ring with the same model and weight sold for 1.5 million purple gold coins at typical shops, but Stephen had raised the price to 5 million. The customers left when they saw the price tags. Vivian shook her head in disapproval. "It's a good thing we're not really dating. You don't have a talent for business." "Business is all about strategy," Stephen said. "If you sell what everyone else is selling, your sales are limited to the average. Jewelry without additional attributes is useless. If you wait, you'll see what I mean. The sales will go up in the next few days." Vivian didn't have the patience to wait that long. She'd already fulfilled her part of the agreement when she transferred a few stores to Stephen's name. The results would depend on his skills. After Vivian left, Stephen sat behind the counter and flipped through martial arts manuals when there were no customers. At closing time, a girl went up to him. "Are you the owner?" "I am. How can I help you?" "Can I ask why your prices are so high?" The other customers had the same question, but none of them had bothered to speak to Stephen before leaving. His cultivation was low, and striking a conversation with an ordinary person would affect their reputation. Stephen held up the prophet's necklace. "I'm the prophet's student. Each purchase comes with a divination. The girl pointed to a ring with the 2 million purple gold coin price tag. If I buy this ring, will you divine my future? Of course, Stephen packaged the ring as the girl swiped her card. He gave her the bag, and she took a seat at the counter. Stephen put the Book of Destiny on top of the glass case and asked the girl to place her hand on the cover. He took the book back and flipped to the first page. As a book's owner, he was the only one who could sense the words on the page with his spiritual energy. In 3 days, your right leg will be injured. But don't worry, it's not serious. Be careful and keep an eye on your surroundings. The girl frowned. Is that it? I spent 2 million for that? Fine, I'll wait 3 days. If your prediction is wrong, I'll turn your store upside down. She grabbed the bag and left the store in a huff. In the Elysian realm, any random cultivator posed a threat. After all, Stephen's cultivation was at the bottom of the pyramid. The Book of Destiny couldn't predict anything complicated, but it didn't lie. There was a reason that the martial artists in the human realm searched the world for the sacred manual. Stephen made the iridescent dragon the manager of Harmonia Pavilion and went up to the attic to cultivate where there were no customers. In 3 days, he'd made 1 sale. It was rare for startups to flop this badly. The city's residents were wealthy, and even the stores with the worst plan and design had at least more than 1 sale in 3 days. The iridescent dragon was bored out of its mind. Trekking up the mountain to forage for herbs is more profitable than wasting time here. There are plenty of herbs near the Dragon Clan's residence. Stephen didn't look up from his martial arts manual. How do you know my business won't succeed? It's only been 3 days. Be patient. The bells chimed as the door flew open. The girl who'd purchased the 2 million purple gold coin ring 3 days ago was back. She limped across the store and sat at the counter. Her overbearing attitude had been replaced with curiosity. I don't know if you're lucky or if I'm just careless. When I was walking down the street, a window shattered and the glass shards cut my leg. Like you said, it wasn't a serious injury. Can you divine my future again? The girl didn't tell the entire truth. She had a fight with cultivators on the outskirts of the city earlier today. Her right leg was injured from one of the explosions. If she was standing any closer, her entire leg would have been torn off. The Book of Destiny wasn't as mystical as the prophet. Stephen couldn't make complicated predictions. Each purchase comes with 1 divination, but it's not guaranteed. If nothing has been going on in your life recently, then there's nothing to divine. Is this how you run your business? Your prices are a ripoff. My business is for those who feel like their lives are at risk. If you're not in danger, there's no reason for you to be here. The girl wasn't satisfied with his answer, but she didn't get up to leave. She sat next to him and waited to see if there'd be any other customers as generous as she was. Half an hour later, Saddle Bowen walked in with his bodyguards. He'd been informed of Stephen's relationship with Vivian after his family gathering, and he wouldn't believe it until he gauged his strength for himself. Shaddle pretended to look around the store and secretly reached out with his aura to assess Stephen's cultivation. It was mediocre, like the rumors. He couldn't understand why 4 of his bodyguards had failed to put him in his place. They deserved a harsher punishment. Is this your new store? It's not doing so well. If you can't manage a simple business like this, you're not qualified to be Vivian's partner. Stephen didn't bother defending himself. The relationship was just for show. If you're interested in my products, feel free to browse. If not, then please leave. Shaddle had investigated Harmonia Pavilion before coming. He knew about the high prices and their selling point. He randomly picked a hairpin with a price tag of 2.2 million purple gold coins. If I buy this hairpin, can you divine my future? All of my customers are equal. I don't discriminate. Shaddle paid in full, and Stephen gave him the hairpin. 1 purple gold coin was equivalent to several $100s in the U.S. Stephen asked Shaddle to place his hand on the Book of Destiny and then used his spiritual energy to sense the words on the page. In 3 days, you'll be punished by the head of the Bowen family and lose part of the management rights to your family business. Shaddle laughed. I'm the heir to the family, and he's my father. Why would he do that to me? You'll know if it's true or not in 3 days. Feel free to come back if my divination doesn't come true. Shaddle scoffed and left the store without looking back. His bodyguards followed him out. The girl was brimming with excitement. She couldn't wait to see if Stephen's prediction came true. The Bowen family has a high status in the city. If you're lying to their heir, they'll ruin your store, and you'll never be able to do business here again. Don't worry about it. Come back in 3 days, and you'll know how it turns out. He might be too embarrassed to show his face when the divination comes true, though. The girl promised she'd be back in 3 days and left the store in anticipation. There were no more customers and it was almost closing time, so Stephen closed the store early. As he was walking back to the hotel with the iridescent dragon, a young man in white and a young man in black were waiting for him at the end of the street. The Mystic Covenant restricted one participant to each invitation. It wasn't clear whether this extended to contracted beasts, but to be on the safe side, Stephen had shamelessly asked the prophet of the Ice Dragon and the Flood Dragon could cultivate at the Dragon Clan's residence to improve their cultivation. The Ice Dragon was a member of his clan, and the Flood Dragon would eventually evolve into a true dragon as its cultivation progressed, so he readily agreed. Mr. Adams, do you have any plans for tonight? No, why? The prophet wants to see you. The two of them were uncharacteristically nervous. Something must have happened. We've had less than 2 conversations. Why is he suddenly interested in me? Well, you see, the Flood Dragon hesitated, so the Ice Dragon took over. Recently, you've been divining the future using the prophet's name and receiving compensation for it. Your business has negatively affected the Dragon Clan's reputation, and many people have been looking for the prophet and offering money in exchange for a divination. Making a living in the Elysian realm wasn't as easy as it sounded. Stephen had inadvertently caused trouble for the prophet. He followed the ice and flood dragons back to the castle and braced himself for a harsh scolding. When it wasn't raining or snowing, the prophet preferred to meditate on the outdoor garden. Even though the dragons had transformed into humans and made their castles their home, living in a building was restrictive. It hasn't been long since you came to the Elysian realm, and you're already stirring up trouble. Predicting the future is the same as prying into the secrets of heaven. You're violating the laws of nature. You're relying on tools, but if you go overboard, your cultivation will be affected. You need to take care of yourself. The prophet was so straightforward that for a second, Stephen was at a loss of words. I apologize for the trouble I've caused. I was hoping to establish my own business, so I wouldn't have to rely on others for money. The Mystic Covenant's recruitment is in a few months' time. How long are you going to stay? There's a lot more spiritual energy in the Elysian realm compared to the human realm. It's easier to cultivate here. Don't forget that you're not an ascender. You don't belong here. If you're caught, there will be severe consequences. I'll keep that in mind. Would you like me to close my store? The prophet shook his head. He wasn't that strict. Even if it was superficial, they were teacher and student. He felt it was necessary to give Stephen guidance on divination. Show me the Book of Destiny, and I'll show you the correct way to use it. Stephen respectfully handed over the book. The prophet flipped to the middle. The contents of each page changed according to the owner's needs. Sometimes it recorded the techniques of Stephen's opponents, and other times it predicted the future. When he collected all 3 volumes of the sacred manual, he'd be able to comprehend the natural laws. The prophet condensed his power and drew a complex diagram on the page. I've infused a fraction of my power into the book. Whether you can comprehend it or not will depend on you. Dragons and humans are fundamentally different species. Unlike humans, our techniques are related to our bloodline. Stephen infused his spiritual energy into the book. He was overwhelmed by what he had comprehended. The sensation was jarring. It felt like the flowers and trees around him had stilled, and he was the only one who could move freely in the ocean of time. It was a sensation he couldn't put into words. Stephen turned to the flowers and trees. They were green and full of life, but when he looked deeper, he saw their future. They were fated to wither at some point in time. His gaze shifted to the prophet, but he didn't see anything. The prophet began to explain, as if he was aware of what Stephen had just tried to do. The wider the gap, the harder it'll be to divine their future. Thank you for your guidance, Stephen said sincerely. The prophet nodded in approval. Luckily, you had this book. I wouldn't have had the patience to teach you otherwise. The whole process had taken around 10 minutes. If it were anyone else, it would have taken them 3 to 5 years. It was in the middle of the night, but the prophet had another visitor. One of the guards rushed to the garden in a fluster. There's someone demanding to see you. He said he has something important to discuss. If we turn him away, he might start a commotion. The Dragon Clan's castle wasn't part of the city. It wasn't against the rules if a fight broke out. The prophet had more or less grasped the situation. He gestured to the trees. Hide over there. Don't show yourself no matter what happens. Stephen did as he was told and hid behind the trees with the dragons. The guard let the visitor into the garden. It was someone Stephen knew all too well. The mysterious visitor was the chief of the gold-horned Asura tribe, Kagan. During the final battle in the Asura realm, right before the canopy was about to fall apart from the explosions, the Asura king had torn open a spatial rift and saved some of the Asuras. One of them was Kagan. He didn't bother hiding his identity before coming to see the prophet. His golden horns were on full display. The prophet wasn't fond of Asuras. They encouraged conflict and death, while the dragons valued peace. Even so, the dragon clan held an important position among the 6 realms. They had to maintain friendly relations with neighboring realms. Some of the dragons lived in the Asura realm. During the past thousands of years, both of their species stayed out of each other's business. They'd even worked together to resolve minor issues from time to time. The Asuras were on the verge of extinction, but the Asura king had ascended into a higher plane. As long as he was alive, they had a chance to rise again. Everyone in the 6 realms has heard of the war in the Asura realm between my species and the beasts. The victor and the loser have been decided, so I won't repeat what you already know. But during the war, a cultivator from the human realm interfered with the outcome. The Asura king sent me to settle the issue. Kagan didn't have to name anyone for the prophet to know who he was talking about. Stephen had become the prophet's student, and Kagan was here to avenge his fallen companions on behalf of the Asura king. The prophet was aware of the Asura's grudges against Stephen, but he hadn't expected them to take action so soon before restoring their strength. The prophet's influence and status was even higher than the leader of the dragon clan. When the leader came across a complicated problem he couldn't resolve on his own, he would come to the prophet to consult him. Killing Stephen and placating the Asuras was as simple as crushing an insect, but the prophet also needed to take the clan's reputation into consideration. As his student, Stephen was known as a member of the clan to outsiders. They wouldn't kill one of their own so easily. Strategy and tactics are 2 major factors that determine the victor of a war. If you only rely on brute force, the only ending is defeat. Stephen is my student. Are you asking me to hand him over and let you slaughter him? Kagan softened his tone. The Asura king was a god, but he wasn't interested in becoming enemies with the dragon clan. I didn't mean to put you in a difficult position. That's not the only way to settle our grudge. We've received multiple invitations to the Mystic Covenant's recruitment. At that time, we'll compete with your student fair and square. Stephen's cultivation was the lowest of the low, but now he had another group of enemies to worry about. The prophet had only named him his student to get the medicinal fossils back from Thieri. The Mystic Covenant's recruitment would be a life and death competition. Whether he survived or died was beyond the prophet's control. If you've made your decision, then what else is there to discuss? The prophet asked. I'd like to request a piece of land next to your clan's residence for training. The previous competitions were held in the Elysian realm. We're planning to cultivate and familiarize ourselves with the realm before it starts. I'll make arrangements. The rest of the conversation went smoothly. Stephen wasn't a part of it, but he felt a tremendous amount of pressure. He came out of hiding when the prophet sent Kagan his way. Kagan had left out details as to why the war started in the first place. If they hadn't attempted to invade the human realm, Stephen wouldn't have gotten involved. In the world of martial arts, the strong come out on top, the prophet said. You should be careful during the recruitment. If we give the Asuras a chance to turn things around, they'll stop at nothing to take back the Asura realm. They'll even try to invade the human realm again. That's your responsibility, not the dragon clan's. Whoever rules the Asura realm is none of our concern. Make the best of the time you have left and improve your cultivation as much as you can. In the days that followed, Stephen's business gradually had more sales. His identity as the prophet's student made people curious about his store, but the high prices discouraged them from buying anything. This worked out in Stephen's favor. He had more time to cultivate and read manuals. The Bowen family's mansion had been built at the center of a lake north of the city. At this time, the family was having a meeting in the hall. Shaddle was the topic of interest. He stood in the middle of the crowd with his head lowered. The head of the family was furious. If I didn't run into the CEO of Amethyst Auction House at dinner, I wouldn't have known you were spending money like dirt. What happened to the item you bid for? Where did you hide it? Their family business had steadily expanded over the years. Spending money was much easier than earning it. If Shaddle kept up his spending habits, they'd go bankrupt soon. When the head of the family appointed Shaddle the heir, he'd given him only some of the management rights. It didn't include the authority to use funds or hire personnel. According to the receipt that the CEO of the Amethyst Auction House provided, Shaddle had purchased an item worth 300 million purple gold coins with company funds. This was an astronomical sum, even for a wealthy family like theirs. You can keep quiet and pretend it didn't happen, but that won't change the truth. Starting today, you're no longer the heir. Don't think the family's assets are automatically yours just because you're my son." Shadow couldn't keep quiet anymore. He knew his father. Once he made a decision, there was no changing his mind. If he lost the right to the family's inheritance, his life would be over. "The truth is, I'm pursuing the oldest daughter of the Ballantine family. I spent $300 million to buy her a gift. If our families become in-laws, our businesses are guaranteed to succeed. Think of the money I spent as an investment." "You sound confident, but how far has your relationship progressed?" "It was going well until a minor issue came up. I didn't expect Vivian's taste in men to be so bad. She fell for someone poor and weak. Recently, there'd been a lot of gossip in the city about Vivian Ballantine. The head of the Bowen family wasn't surprised that she'd picked some cultivator off the street instead of her son. Shadow was a player who only knew how to brag. He had nothing to show for it. If he took over the family business, it'd go bankrupt in less than a year. Either way, using our company's funds without permission violates our family's rules, and there will be consequences. You're not allowed to take one step out of the mansion for half a month. During this time, focus on honing your martial arts and improving your cultivation. Your bank cards will be suspended for the time being." Stephen's divination had come true, and Shadow was less than pleased. He called the leader of the bodyguards to his room after the meeting. "I don't understand how you lost to someone whose cultivation is below an ascender. How deep is Vivian and Stephen's relationship? How far have they gone?" "I've sent my people to monitor him 24 hours a day. Stephen's been busy with his jewelry store. He doesn't have time to see Vivian. His business isn't doing well. He has one sale every 3 to 5 days. Stephen's divination ability was genuine. There was no telling what other skills he was hiding. If he was pretending to be weak and revealed his real capabilities during the Mystic Covenant's recruitment, Vivian's father would have to acknowledge him as his son-in-law. Shadow would lose his chance to marry Vivian. Find some way to stop Stephen from participating in the competition. Lure him out of the city and stage an accident." The leader of the bodyguards was concerned about what Shadow's father would do to them if the prophet confronted the Bowen family for going after his student. Every martial artist who worked for the family was required to report to Shadow's father. He was their superior, not his son. If the prophet finds out, he won't let it go. Shadow threw up his hands in frustration. "Can you use your brains for once? Find people to take on the job. We're not getting our hands dirty." "How are we going to recruit them if your bank card is frozen?" "I have a stash of private funds at the farmhouse in the suburbs. I'll send you the password to the safe in the bedroom. Take care of it as soon as possible." The leader of the bodyguards was familiar with Saddle's farmhouse. This was where he spent the night with women he picked up at the club. Stephen's first customer dropped by the store in 3 days like she said she would. She was expecting to see Shadow demanding a refund because his divination was wrong, but there was no trace of him even after waiting half a day. Stephen looked up from his martial arts manual. The girl was staring at the door, waiting patiently for Shadow to appear. "I've never seen someone as idle as you. You've been loitering in my store since this morning. If you don't spend $2 million, I wouldn't have served you tea and let you sit here for free air conditioning." The girl snorted. This was the worst shopping experience she'd ever had. "Your fortune-telling is overpriced. You're going to go out of business soon." "My divinations are real. Didn't you see the crowd waiting outside the Dragon Clan's residence, hoping for the prophet to change his mind and divine their future? If they come to my store and spend a little money on jewelry, they'll get a divination as a bonus." The girl glanced at a necklace on display. It cost 3 million purple gold coins. "You call this a little money?" Stephen gave her a pointed look, which she returned. Both of them refused to yield. The iridescent dragon walked into the store, interrupting their stare-down. "The prophet asked me to tell you to stay away from the castle and the wooden house we built for the time being. Kagan is in the vicinity with his companions. They have at least 10 invitations." Stephen wasn't confident he could take down 10 Asuras, let alone thousands of other competitors. He decided to put his cultivation on hold and go back to the human realm to assess Liam's progress in the time they hadn't seen each other. "I'll leave the store to you. There's enough jewelry to last a while." "What about the divination?" the iridescent dragon asked. "Give them a voucher and ask them to come back at a later date. You won't have too much to do. There won't be too many sales." Stephen sent a quick message to Vivian, telling her that he'd found a quiet place to cultivate and wouldn't be available for the next few days. He left the store and went to a deserted alleyway to open a spatial rift back to the human realm. His first stop was the military administration building in Annapolis. To his surprise, most of the building was empty when he walked in. The big shots were nowhere to be found. Liam was the only one there, and he was appointed the temporary commander. Did something happen? Liam pulled up an electronic map. The leader of Tempest Citadel, Thorin Ambrose, attacked the southwestern border between the U.S. and Garan. On the map, the Blue River Mountains were marked with red dots. They were locations of recent attacks. After Garan became the United States' ally, they'd collaborated on various projects, including military factories, water power plants, tunnels, and more. These facilities had become Thorin's targets. When he destroyed the dam connecting to the water power station, 22 small villages had flooded downstream. The number of casualties were close to 30,000, and the initial losses were as high as 70 billion. Stephen's expression darkened the more he heard. If I knew this would happen, I would have killed him at all costs when the Ascenders drove him into a corner. Even if you went after him, his divine guardian beast would have helped him escape, Liam said. The Leviathan unit's leader is bringing an elite team to the mountains to search for him, and the Empyrean Circle is escorting war supplies to the fortress. 4 of the palace guardians are protecting your wife and daughter. Thorin's goal is to destroy our key facility at the border. His attacks are unpredictable and fast. He's long gone by the time we get there. The salamander is like your threadworms. They can burrow underground and lurk beneath lakes and rivers. Tracking Thorin down was an impossible task for regular martial artists. There were only 2 people Stephen could think of who could put a stop to his massacre, Tristan and Zane. No one in the entire country could tell these 2 ancient martial artists what to do. They had been taking it easy ever since the battle with Tempest Citadel. Aside from lounging at home, they either went out to find members of the Leviathan unit to spar with, or went to Dr. Dalton's research institute to test his new devices. Stephen found Tristan and Zane grilling meat in the yard. Empty bottles of wine were piled on the table. Tristan waved the skewer in his hand as a greeting. Want to join us? When you get as old as me, you'll understand how important it is to relax and enjoy life. There's no time for that. Come with me. Stephen dragged them to a helicopter, and they set off for the southwestern border. Even though Thierry was Tristan's teacher and a room had been arranged for him at the mansion, he was really there. When Stephen brought Tristan and Zane up to speed, they didn't have much confidence in resolving the issue. They were almost killed when they fought Thorin and the salamander with the Ascenders. Thorin isn't the problem, Tristan said. It's his divine guardian beast. That salamander is always by his side. There's nothing we can do if he's not alone. We're martial artists from an ancient era, but our cultivations aren't what they used to be. For the rest of the flight, they discussed ways to split up Thorin and the salamander, but none of their ideas seemed feasible. They arrived at the southwestern border a few hours later. Jace and a small group of Leviathan unit members came to meet them. They were covered in wounds. Did you find Thorin? Stephen asked. And what's going on up ahead? Did he attack another military facility? There's no sign of him, Jace said. The factory's energy storage exploded. We're trying to put out the flames. Each attack was more destructive than the last. There were hundreds of thousands of troops at the border, but they were no match for Thorin and the salamander. The Leviathan unit's leader was searching for the mountain for them. Jace led Stephen, Tristan, and Zane to the command center at the fortress to wait for news from the front lines. The Blue River Mountains spanned thousands of miles. Thorin and the salamander hid in one of the caves on one of the many peaks. The blizzard and low temperatures made this an ideal hiding place. The salamander was a divine guardian beast tasked with the responsibility of protecting the Tempest Citadel. The faction was in ruins, and it had lost the meaning of its existence, but there was still hope. Otherwise, it wouldn't have followed Thorin around blindly. Instead of wasting your time on the United States' military, you should think about how to revive Tempest Citadel. They have troops stationed at other borders. Attacking this one will barely leave a dent in their overall strength. Thorin's rationality was blinded by hate. The member who survived ran away when our faction fell. I don't know where they are, and even if we do find them, we don't have enough people to make a difference. We can't revive the faction. Then let's establish a new one. The Sovereign's made a long list of enemies in his lifetime. They'll be our allies. When we have enough people on our side, we'll start a full-scale war against the U.S. Do you remember the martial artist from the island state who participated in the competition on Mirage Island? We have a common enemy. We have grounds for an alliance. Thorin pointed at the sky. It's too late for that. They're here. The Leviathan unit's leader was heading their way on the back of a falcon with his team. He drew a symbol on his scroll, and it rotated in the direction of the cave on the snowy peak. The Leviathan unit members combined their energy and condensed a blade of light. It struck the cave, turning it into a pile of rubble in the snow. Thorin and the salamander came into view when the smoke and dust cleared. They didn't have a single scratch. The salamander released a stream of bubbles at the Leviathan unit. The raging blizzard changed their trajectory, making it hard to predict which direction to dodge in. The Leviathan unit's leader drew another symbol on his scroll. A coffin emerged from the clouds. The lid opened, and skeletons leaped onto the ground, surrounding Thorin and the salamander. Chains extended from the coffin. They resembled an octopus's tentacles from afar. "I've heard about your scroll," Thorin said. "It's as mysterious as the rumors. Tempest Citadel is in ruins. If you spent the rest of your life in hiding, we would have let you go. You make it sound like you have the upper hand. The southwestern border is about to collapse. You have hundreds of thousands of troops, but what do you think will happen if we kill off the officials? Your country will be in chaos." Thorin had spent the majority of his life in Garan, but he had some understanding of the United States' position. There were many powerful countries around the world waiting for them to slip up. If the officials were killed, they wouldn't hesitate to invade the United States' territory at the first possible moment. Thorin shattered the skeletons with one swing of his sword. The bones hovered in the air before piecing together again. They emitted a black aura of death. The salamander released another series of bubbles and trapped the skeletons inside. No matter how hard they struggled, they couldn't break free. Thorin deflected the chains as they swept past. When the Leviathan unit rushed towards him, the salamander knocked them back with its tongue. In the midst of the stalemate, Stephen, Tristan, and Zane arrived on the back of the ice dragon. Thorin recognized Tristan and Zane. "Did you two forget about the thrashing I gave you last time? Are you back for another round?" His gaze fell on Stephen. "Mr. Adams, you're here too. Did you like the parting gift I gave you? You're the reason my faction is gone. I'll kill your family and friends and make you feel the same loss I felt." The salamander threw a large bubble at the ice dragon. It contained 3 different venoms. Even if Stephen's team dodged it, the troops below would suffer when it burst. Zane condensed a sky of storm clouds and hurricanes. The torrential rain and wind enveloped the bubble, trapping the venom inside. The storm rushed into the clouds, and the water diluted the venom to a minimum. "We're getting nowhere," the salamander said in a low voice. "We'll have a better chance fighting if we find the martial artist from the island state." Thorin scanned the mountains. Flames and destruction ravaged the land. His goal had been accomplished, and there was no reason for him to stay here any longer. He inserted the tip of his sword into the snow, and screens of light surrounded Stephen's team and the Leviathan unit. While they were darting around the screens to avoid having their reflections captured, Thorin and the salamanders flew towards the east. Stephen's team chased after them. The Leviathan unit stayed behind to manage the southwestern border and rebuild their damaged facilities. As the salamander passed by the city, it released a bubble toward the buildings below. If it burst, 1 million civilians would meet their tragic end. The bubble was moving too fast, and Zane didn't have enough time to condense another hurricane. Just as Stephen was frantically wondering how to save the city, Tristan leaped off the ice dragon's back and enveloped the buildings in a shadow. The bubble disappeared inside the 2-dimensional space without a sound. Stephen breathed a sigh of relief, but it was too early to relax. He summoned the threadworms, and they surrounded the salamander in a storm of iron sand. Its magnetic properties almost pulled Thorin's sword out of his grip. He tightened his hold on the hilt. If he wasn't careful, he would lose his only weapon. Tempest Citadel specialized in space-time techniques, and Thorin had mastered all of them. He swung his sword, and ripples swept the sky. Blades of light were hidden in the spatial fluctuations. The ice dragon couldn't see beyond the ripples, but it sensed that something wasn't right. It dove for the ground. Stephen would have been intimidated if he hadn't progressed to the late stage of the red dust immortal realm. He'd created an internal world where life forms were born, and he could break through to the true immortal realm. Stephen condensed a blizzard of icicles with the ice dragon's spiritual energy. They slipped through the narrow openings between spatial fluctuations and spiraled towards Thorin. When the salamander's tongue swept the icicles aside, the shards grazed its mouth, drawing blood. Thorin was alarmed by its injuries. The salamander was his only companion. "What happened? Did the ice cut you?" Even his sword wouldn't have been able to do that. He compressed the aura in his sword and infused it into the tip of the ice. It hasn't been that long since we last saw each other, but he's grown a lot stronger. The sandstorm became denser and blotted out the sky. Every time Thorin tried to disperse it, he only succeeded in scattering the iron fragments and accelerating the storm. He was forced to use an array to increase the salamander's speed and hasten their escape. Stephen's team gave chase for several hours, but their long-range attacks couldn't keep up. They ended up exhausting their stamina for nothing. They stopped when they reached the coastline and watched Thorin and his salamander disappear into the distance. If Stephen continued his pursuit, the other countries would notice. If they investigated and found out about his involvement in Tempest Citadel's downfall, they would use it as an excuse to start a conflict. He didn't have much time to spare in the human realm. The Mystic Covenant's recruitment would begin in a few months. The ice dragon landed on the beach, and Stephen summoned the whale. They're fast, but there aren't too many places they can land over the ocean. Follow them, and if there's an opportunity, get rid of them. The whale had been bored ever since Stephen left the human realm. It was excited to finally have something to do. It flicked its tail and dove into the depths of the ocean. Ever since Cadus became the United States' ally, the port had been restricted. When other countries wanted to do business in Cadus, they'd receive the sovereign's permission. This was a big inconvenience to the island state, who frequently transported their goods to other countries through Cadus's port. Their ships were forced to take a detour, which increased their cost of transportation and caused their products to lose their competitive advantage. The leader of the island state's ancient martial arts faction, Hashan, was at the government's finance department, listening to the director's complaints. Many of your martial artists are executives of our country's leading enterprises. If we reopen Cadus's market, it'll benefit both of us. Why don't you contact the U.S. and talk to them about this? Hashan asked. I did. They rejected my request. Back then, the island state had concluded with Warhawk and Maplewood using Cadus to restrict the U.S. from expanding their businesses. The sovereign hadn't forgotten their scheme and prohibited their countries from accessing Cadus's port. Are you going to use force to open the market? It won't be easy, Hashan said. He'd sent a group of his martial artists to participate in the United States' martial arts competition, but most of them had been killed. The U.S. was a formidable opponent. The director waved his subordinate over. I know, which is why we need allies. Hashan was bewildered when the director's subordinate removed his mask. It was so realistic that he thought it was his real face. The skin beneath the mask was covered in burn scars. Who is he? He used to be the cardinal of the Tribulation sect, the director explained. He survived the missile, but he was disfigured by the explosion. Everything had changed on that fateful day. Dilus was watching the trial with Augustus, the cardinals, and the other members when the missile struck the crater and put an end to the Tribulation sect. He didn't care about reviving the faction. What he wanted was revenge. The sovereign is the cause of all of our problems. If he dies, the U.S. will be defenseless. The military is nothing without their leader. He's made numerous enemies over the years, and they'll become our allies. Hashan refused to let them use his martial artists as a tool for revenge. If you're confident you have what it takes, then show me the evidence. Sure, our allies will be here soon. 3 hours later, a beast was sighted on the island state's coastline. The finance department was near the shore, and they had a full view of the water. Dillis released his aura to inform Thorin where he was. Hashan's intelligence network was well developed. He recognized Thorin when he walked into the room through the balcony. I'm surprised you're alive. I thought Tempest Citadel was wiped out. Your faction cultivates space-time techniques. How'd you end up like this? Thorin admitted his defeat. It was too late to pretend like his faction still had a chance at revival. The Sovereign conspired with the invaders from another world to take us down. His goal was to expand the United States' business to Garan, and we were his way in. He used firepower and destroyed the mountain. Thorin conveniently left out Tempest Citadel's idealistic ambitions, the massacre of the Ascenders, and human experimentations. Hashan, Dillis, and the director couldn't believe their ears. The Azores were the enemy of every country. How could the Sovereign collude with them? Thorin went on to explain his relatively simple plan. The Sovereign had been spending a lot of time in another realm recently. This was their best chance to destroy the United States' backbone. Their first step was to eliminate the Sovereign's closest companions. With no one left to protect him, getting rid of him would be easy. Thorin passionately described a future without the Sovereign. When the United States' upper management is gone, they'll lose their influence over the neighboring countries. Cadus and Garan will regain their independent status, and that will also be the island state Warhawk and Maplewood's chance to take over. The director was convinced. He didn't care about the details as long as the island state's economy improved. The Sovereign is a skilled martial artist, but the people around him shouldn't be that difficult to deal with. Hashan, your martial artists haven't been up to much lately. Letting them sit around is a waste of their talent. After thinking it over, Hashan agreed, but he wouldn't be sending his martial artists to Garan. It was further and more accessible to the U.S. than Cadus. Thorin volunteered to take the lead. The U.S. set up trading companies at Cadis's docks and mining facilities in the mountains. I'll attack them while you sneak in with your team. While they were scheming against the U.S., Stephen, Tristan, and Zane were at the eastern port, discussing what to do next. Thorin had disappeared across the ocean, but this wouldn't be the last they'd see of him. Out of the three of them, Tristan was the least concerned. He was as carefree as always, even after almost losing his life during the battle against Tempest Citadel. There's nothing we can do. Why worry about it now? He'll be back whether you like it or not. All three of them looked over the ocean. Transport ships came and went. Trade at the eastern port was thriving and on the rise. The customs staff stood next to Stephen in anticipation, hoping that he would carry out an inspection and notice their hard work. Unfortunately, he wasn't in the mood right now. I got another invitation to the Mystic Covenant's recruitment. I'm bringing Liam with me. Can you two help me train him? Tristan was impressed. In the short time they hadn't seen each other, Stephen's cultivation had increased quite a bit. It wouldn't be long until he broke through to the true immortal realm. How did you manage that? Did you find a new follower over there? It wasn't easy for my teacher to get an invitation, and I doubt you had the skills to steal one. My 3 dragon companions helped me gain the Dragon Clan's support. Anyway, don't try to change the subject. Can you train Liam? Zane nodded. Mirage Island isn't that far from the port. The research institute on the island has been suspended, but the facilities are still operating as usual. Let's go there for training. There's no one around to bother us. Okay, I'll tell Liam to come to the port. As the Sovereign, Stephen had full authority over every department in the country. He worked remotely from his laptop to communicate with their respective directors and get an overview of recent events. Aside from the southwestern border, every other region was prospering. At sunset, Liam arrived at the eastern port and met up with Stephen, Tristan, and Zane. A heavy burden fell on his shoulders. When Stephen gave him the golden invitation, in the Elysian realm, Ascenders were the weakest cultivators, and neither of them had ascended. The 4 of them headed to Mirage Island on a patrol boat. The platform that was used as the arena for the martial arts competition had been repaired along with other damaged buildings. Not that many guards were around. Tristan and Zane called Liam over, and a fight broke out without explanation. In the darkness of the night, it was hard to pinpoint their attacks. Stephen saw Liam stagger and heard the dull sound of a collision a few seconds later. Tristan and Zane were moving so fast that the sound waves couldn't keep up. Stephen activated the Book of Destiny. He observed the flow of inner energy in Liam's body and the contraction of his muscles to predict his counterattack. Tristan and Zane had years of combat experience under their belt. They were formidable, even if they were only using their fists. Before Liam could condense his inner energy, they dispersed it with one swing of their fist. The fight went on with Liam unable to use his full strength. At some point, Tristan and Zane finally let up. Your control over your inner energy and aura is lacking, Zane said. It's easy for your opponent to predict their movements. You have to blend in with your surroundings and attack when your opponent is least expecting it. Liam was at a loss. He'd never heard of this concept before, not even when he was training with the Leviathan unit's leader. The more energy I condense, the stronger my aura becomes. How do I hide it? To put it simply, you need to separate your body from your flesh and blood and turn it into something commonly found in nature, such as leaves, rocks, wind, or mud. The deeper your understanding of the laws of nature, the easier it'll be to integrate your essence into the space around you. If your opponent were to attack you, it'd be similar to attacking the entire space, which is much more difficult than attacking you alone. It was easier said than done. The results of Liam's training would depend on his comprehension. Tristan gathered the natural elements of wood, metal, water, fire, and ice in their physical form next to Liam and applied it to his body. If he couldn't understand what it was to incorporate his physical body into his surroundings, then the easiest way for him to figure it out was to experience it for himself. While they were engrossed in their training, Stephen went to the Research Institute. Dr. Dalton had shown him around multiple times, and he'd gotten used to the strange devices and control panels. He activated the system in the same way Dr. Dalton had, and the building lit up with a faint blue light. An electronically synthesized voice came out from the loudspeaker. Welcome to the Research Institute, Mr. Adams. I am an AI assistant. Let me know if you have any instructions. I can also contact Dr. Dalton and his team for assistance. Stephen was here to inspect Dr. Dalton's research on controlling the brain with the AI chip in battle. It took several hours to implant an AI chip into an individual's brain. The core of the research involved speeding up this process in a matter of seconds. He originally thought that it would take some time to research the progress, but the AI assistant opened a sealed glass container to show him the test samples that Dr. Dalton had developed. There was a dart soaking in liquid nitrogen inside. The exterior was shaped like a bullet shell, and the AI chip was embedded into the groove in the middle. When the dart pierces the target's skull, metallic needles will grow from the AI chip and connect with their nervous system. From there, it'll release commands according to the computerized input. The dart is a sample, not the final product. It hasn't been tested in combat, and it's unknown how well it's penetrating the target's bone tissue. For the dart to take effect, it'll have to reach the target's brain. Stephen reviewed the instruction manual. Dr. Dalton had used metallic ores to create the dart exterior. "I'll take this with me and test it out. I'll bring back more ores from another realm later, so he can upgrade the sample." "Understood. I'll let him know," the AI assistant replied. Sounds of intense conflict drifted into the lab. It seemed like Tristan and Zane weren't planning on letting Liam take a break. A real battle didn't have a pause button. It was a fast-paced, and every decision counted. Liam felt like his muscles and bones were on the verge of collapse. Tristan and Zane had a unique set of skills as martial arts techniques. Zane utilized the destructive power of lightning and thunder. Tristan lurked in the shadows like an assassin and attacked from Liam's blind spots. His techniques didn't contain energy, but when they landed, they condensed into runes on Liam's skin and slowly drained his inner energy. The lack of stamina was more debilitating than pain. Stephen watched them for a bit longer before sitting down and settling into a meditative state. It had been some time since he checked on his internal world. He entered the space in his consciousness and looked around. The landscape was in ruins from the power of the Berserker's blessing. While he was wondering how long it would take for his world to recover, he noticed a small plant sprouting from the ground. It was the birth of a life form he'd been waiting for. Stephen's spiritual energy enveloped the space, expanding and contracting rhythmically in the tune of his heart. Thunder rumbled in the sky, and rain fell over the barren land. He had a deep understanding of the evolution of civilization. The heavy rain from tens of millions of years ago lasted for centuries, covering most of the Earth's surface from water. The first single-celled organism appeared in the ocean and eventually led to the formation of a rich ecosystem. A smelting factory had been built on Cadis's mountain, where metallic ores were turned into molten iron and removed from its impurities through a series of purification procedures. The raw materials were then sent to the U.S. through transport ships. Even though the world was at peace, the U.S. continued to produce advanced weapons and equipment. Thorin and Dylus observed the factory below on the salamander's back. It was brightly lit in the looming darkness of the night. "It's a shame that economic losses can't shake the United States' foundation," Dylus said. "The sovereign wouldn't care less about losing one factory. He won't be coming, but his subordinates will. Kill as many of them as you can. I'm curious as to how strong the Tribulation sect is. I met Pope Augustus once more than a decade ago." As Thorin spoke, a nostalgic feeling washed over him. There weren't that many martial artist factions left. The Hidden Cloud Temple, Spectre Cemetery, Bloodfiend Valley, and Peach Blossom Moor were on good terms with Stephen, and those who'd opposed him, like the Tribulation sect and Tempest Citadel, were wiped out. Dylus gathered his inner energy in his palm and tossed the ball of light at the factory below. It felt like a drop of water and ignited the chemicals. The building went up in flames. The workers ran for their lives, but they didn't get far before they burnt to a crisp. The salamander flew to their next destination. Thorin and Dylus attacked the other factories and warehouses in the area without reservation. In just 30 minutes, flames ravaged half of the mountain range. The Leviathan unit members stationed at the foot of the mountain had taken action the instant they heard the first explosion. They contacted the military for backup and headed up the mountain to track down the culprits. The salamander was eye-catching and easy to spot. When the Leviathan unit leaped into the air to strike down the salamander, spatial fluctuations spanned the sky and distorted their perception. Thorin and Dylus seemed far away, but in the next second they were impaled by their swords. The Leviathan unit members fell from the sky and perished in the sea of fire. The two Leviathan unit higher-ups at the command center at the foot of the mountain yelled into their communication device, but there was no response. Were they killed? Where did the culprit come from? What's the point in discussing that now? We need to take all the confidential information from the mountain and leave. But what about the workers? We need to send more teams up the mountain to provide support. It can't be a large-scale invasion. The culprits weren't caught on camera. We have more people on our side. At the very least, we can rescue the wounded. The two higher-ups had differing opinions, but time was of the essence. As a compromise, they called for more reinforcements and rounded up the remaining members at the command center. Manpower wasn't required to transport confidential information. The two higher-ups and their team condensed a barrier of inner energy and charged into the fire to salvage what they could. The terrible news spread to Mirage Island, interrupting Liam's training session with Tristan and Zane. A Leviathan unit member at the scene started a video call with Steven to report the situation. Our industrial facilities in Cadis were attacked. We can't determine the number of casualties at this time, but we've lost contact with 11 factories and 8 warehouses. Where are the culprits? They're attacking from the sky with energy waves and targeting highly flammable resources. 70 Leviathan unit members stationed on the mountain went to stop them, but we've lost contact. Lost contact most likely meant they'd been killed. There was a high chance that Cadis's guards had met the same fate. Their helicopter had been shot down by waves of energy before they could get close. Gather the Leviathan unit and Empyrean Circle members stationed in Cadis for now. Don't act rashly. Hide in the bomb shelter on the mountain and track the enemy using your aura. I'll be there as soon as I can. Steven ended the call and summoned the ice dragon. It was obvious who the culprit was. Thorin had attacked the southwestern border earlier today. If he was making another move so soon, that could only mean he'd found an ally. The Leviathan unit and the Empyrean Circle wouldn't be able to handle them on their own. Thorin and Dylas hid in a small fishing village along the coast. They'd safely escaped after Cadis's mountain range was thrown into chaos. According to the plan, Hashan and his martial artists were on their way to Cadis. Their job was to assassinate as many high-ranking members of the U.S. as possible and make the Sovereign understand how it felt to lose his companions. After cultivating for so many years on a secluded mountain, I finally understand how luxurious life can be in the outside world, Thorin said, downing the wine in one gulp. Dylas stuffed a piece of meat into his mouth. It didn't taste like anything. He'd lost his sense of taste from the missile's explosion. If we succeed, we can live the rest of our lives in luxury. I won't be staying. When the time is right, I'll be going to the Asura realm. The Asuras were part of the reason Tempest Citadel fell. I'm going to make them pay for what they did. Thorin's cultivation had reached the true immortal realm. If he broke through the threshold, he would trigger his trial from the heavens and have a chance to ascend to a higher plane. However, he wasn't aware that the war between the Asuras and the beasts had already been ended. The beasts had won, and there were no longer any Asuras in the realm. You want to ascend to another realm? Dylas said. Doesn't that go against Tempest Citadel's objective? Now that things had escalated to a point of no return, Thorin didn't care about maintaining the human realm's barrier anymore. His goal was to ascend to the Asura realm and take his revenge. Adhering to the rules will only hold you back. You have to be flexible when the situation calls for it. Thorin's phone vibrated with a call from Hashan. Cadis's authorities have sealed off most of the passageways into the country. This doesn't affect you, but make sure you hide your tracks thoroughly. Got it. When will you get here? Our ships will reach the coastline before dawn. Cadis doesn't have enough people to patrol every route and investigate everyone entering the country. Hashan's faction was involved in many businesses, including 2 coastal fishery companies in Cadis. It wasn't strange for their executives to enter the country for an inspection. Thorin and Dylas had ruined every factory and warehouse on the mountain, and the U.S. wouldn't be able to rebuild them anytime soon. If things went according to plan, the empty market share would soon fall into Hashan's hands. The ice dragon landed on top of Cadis's palace, and Steven barged into the garden. No one could stop the Sovereign. Fortunately, the king, Javan Lorenz, had already gathered the officials and given them instructions on how to manage the chaos in the mountain, instead of sitting around and wasting time. How did the culprits infiltrate your country so easily? Steven demanded. What happened to your radars, air defense towers, and patrol aircraft? Javan shook uncomfortably from the surge in aura and forced himself to keep his voice steady. The ministers stood to the side with their eyes on the floor, too afraid to meet the Sovereign's gaze. Please calm down, Mr. Adams. My people are investigating the incident as we speak. The Leviathan unit, Empyrean Circle, and Cadis's military had gone up the mountain after the attack stopped. There were no survivors. The bodies of the workers and the 70 Leviathan unit members had been burned beyond recognition. They had to use DNA tests to identify them, which would take several hours. Steven sat quietly in the garden, waiting for a report from the front lines. The higher-ups at the command center had succeeded in retrieving the confidential information from the factories and warehouses and brought them back. The stacks of document included processing and production data, as well as technical plans. The culprits didn't seem interested in them. Is there a way to monitor the entire country? Steven asked. The transportation department has set up surveillance cameras, but most of them are outdoors, Javan said. We don't have access to the cameras in private residences." "Then hand me the authority." Javon agreed in a heartbeat. He didn't hesitate to shirk his responsibilities to the sovereign. Not long after, warships from the United States' eastern port surrounded Cadiz to seal off the country. They were one step too late. Hashan and his martial artist had dove into the sea and swam the rest of the way to shore. They changed into their disguises and blended in with the tourists. There was no news of the other culprits for the rest of the night. When dawn broke, Stephen led Liam, Tristan, and Zane to a hotel near the palace. Javon had arranged a VIP suite for them. The room was spacious and bright, and none of them were tired. Stephen took the Book of Destiny to find Thorin. Letting him loose in Cadiz posed a risk to his people and the civilians. "There's a big gap between you and him," Zane warned. "The divination might not be accurate, and there could be a backlash." "This is the fastest way. I can't let him leave the country." Stephen flipped open the book and drew a pattern on the blank page. He'd fought Thorin more than once, and the book had recorded his information in great detail. Stephen infused his spiritual energy onto the page. Half of his inner energy reserves were emptied as a bright light enveloped the book. He resisted the backlash and read the contents on the page. There was a map of a coastline somewhere in Cadiz. Liam opened up the electronic map on his phone and compared it to the map in the book. It didn't take him long to find the location. "He's hiding in the fishing village, but there's no guarantee he'll still be there when we arrive. And even if we find him, it won't be easy to capture him." Thorin's location had been found, but another difficult problem had taken its place. Stephen considered his options and decided to hunt him down with the whale's help. Thorin and Dylas were experienced martial artists, and their senses were sharp. They felt someone's gaze on them. Thorin set his wine glass on the table and looked up at the sky. "I have a feeling someone's spying on us." "We're in a remote village," Dylas said. "There's barely anyone around. If we go back to the city, we can use the civilians as leverage. This isn't the US, and Cadiz is their ally. The sovereign isn't as restrained here. He'll do whatever it takes to get rid of us." Thorin summoned the salamander. It emerged from the ocean and opened its mouth. He didn't hesitate to jump in. "We'll hide in its stomach. The ocean will cover our auras." Dylas cast a wary glance at the salamander's gaping mouth. "Isn't this a little over the top? The sovereign will find us sooner or later. A fight to the death is inevitable." Thorin didn't wait for him. "You can wait here if you want," he called over his shoulder as he went deeper. Dylas eventually followed him into the salamander's stomach. After the Tribulation sect was destroyed, he left Scotty and went to the island state. As a cardinal, he was well informed of recent events. The sovereign was frequently in the headlines of every newspaper. Every time Dylas saw his title, his grudge deepened, and he made it his life's goal to end him with his own hands. The ice dragon flew over the village. Stephen reached out with its aura, but he couldn't sense Thorin's presence. He couldn't use the Book of Destiny too often. It drained a significant amount of energy. With nothing else to go on, the ice dragon landed on the shore, and Stephen's team searched the village. The waves parted, and the blue whale surfaced above the water. It was so big that it resembled an island from afar. "There's a golden salamander in the sea." "Where is it?" Stephen asked. "I lost sight of it. It can change its size." Stephen summoned the threadworms, and they released a ball of iron sand into the water. He covered the surface of the sand with his inner energy before it sank to search the depths of the ocean. The salamander had shrunk into the size of a fish and swam between the cracks of the rocky layer to reach the other side of Cadiz. Hashan and his martial artists made it to the coast at dawn and impatiently ambushed the teams on patrol. The teams were a mix of personnel from the US and Cadiz. Hashan's martial artists specialized in transforming into natural phenomena and killing their targets from the shadows. The sunny weather turned stormy, and within minutes it started to drizzle. The streets were empty. There were no pedestrians or vehicles in sight. Cadiz made an official announcement telling the civilians to stay home. The teams on patrol chatted as they made their rounds. "Our enemy has a beast as his mount. Why would he walk on the street in broad daylight? Setting up this many patrols does nothing except split up our military strength. It'll be easier for our enemy to break through our lines of defense. That's why you are not a commander. The sovereign instructed us to split up and patrol the area in teams for a reason. It's obvious that our enemy is hiding somewhere in the country and waiting for another opportunity to attack. If we stay together, we'll be less prepared when he strikes again." While they were talking, they didn't notice the drizzle begin to change. A mist settled around them, blurring their surroundings. They felt a light sting in the back of their necks, and a moment later, their inner energy began to drain out of them. They ran to the armored vehicle to call for backup, but they couldn't open the door. The rainwater had flowed into the gap between the door and the windows and glued them together. The patrol team was on their own. They drew their weapons and prepared for a fight to the death. Bubbles drifted from the puddles on the ground, and watery figures crawled out from within. Kashan's martial artists were hiding far away and using the water to conjure clones of themselves. A special poison had been mixed into the rain and mist. It drained the patrol team's inner energy, putting them at a disadvantage. When they struck the watery figures with their swords, the liquid adhered to their blades, making it impossible to pull them out. The water crept along the swords and forced them to let go. The moment their weapons left their hands, the watery figures' arms turned into spears and pierced their hearts. Their bodies collapsed with a thud, and silence returned to the empty street. Multiple teams on patrol near the main roads fell victim to the same attack. They didn't have time to send out a distress signal before they were killed. As the teams gradually lost connection with each other, they realized that their enemy had made their move. When Stephen's team rushed to the scene, they discovered the shocking number of casualties. Stephen had been through many tough battles, but this was the only one where he'd felt this helpless. Liam crouched down and assessed the wounds. I can't sense any lingering energy coming from their bodies. Judging from their injuries, it's likely the culprit killed them without a weapon. That doesn't sound like Thorin's handiwork. Is it possible he found an ally here? What's the exact number of casualties? Stephen asked. 55 Leviathan unit members were killed. Cadis's authorities had suffered even more losses. Javon, who thought he could take it easy after leaving everything to Stephen, had to get back to work. He instructed the official department to conduct a joint investigation on the activities of every company with foreign capital. He didn't know if this would lead to any clues, but if the sovereign accused him of doing nothing to help, they would have no excuses to give. Dr. Dalton sent his assistant to transport a school of fish with AI chips implanted to Cadis. The first step in resolving the crisis was to find the culprit's exact location. Stephen didn't have much luck searching the ocean with the threadworm's iron sand. He turned to Tristan and Zane for help. We had a hard time dealing with Thorin on land, and now he's hiding in his beast in the water. We might have a shot if we lure them to Phantasma Isle using their arrays, Tristan suggested. Stephen was skeptical. How are we going to do that? The Ascenders guarding the island disappeared during the battle with Tempest Citadel. They're the only ones who know how to control the arrays. If we make a mistake, they could spiral out of control. We don't have another option, Tristan insisted. Let's find Phantasma Isle and search for the core. The arrays were active for thousands of years. They have to be drawing energy from somewhere. As an experienced thief who'd broken arrays and stolen treasure from around the world, Tristan had a deep understanding of all kinds of arrays. He sounded confident, and with nothing else to go on, Stephen could only agree. Liam, stay here and manage the patrols. I'll head to the bottom of the ocean to search for Thorin. What should we do about the supply chain? Liam asked. The factories and warehouses are in ruins, and we don't know how long it'll take to rebuild them. Most of the investors are from the Eastern Port. Your wife is also an investor. Contact the local construction companies and see what they can do. The whale swallowed Stephen, Tristan, and Zane and dove into the water. The school of fish from Dr. Dalton's assistant swam beside it. Soon, they reached the depths where the sun didn't shine. Stephen had prepared energy crystals to illuminate the seabed. Phantasma Isle was covered in plants and shells. The fluctuations in energy were much weaker than before. The whale flicked its tail, sweeping the vegetation aside and revealing the true appearance of the island. Tristan reached out with his aura. He didn't sense anyone on the island. There's no one inside. The treasures are up for grabs. Stephen shot him an incredulous look. Is this really the time? I didn't get a single treasure the last time I was here, and I even lost some of my own. Do you know how humiliating that was? The dire situation on the surface wasn't a priority to Tristan. He didn't come all the way to the bottom of the ocean for nothing. He wasn't leaving without his treasures. The defensive array from the last time wasn't active anymore, but there seemed to be another array keeping the seawater from flowing into the island. The three of them landed on the beach and used the dim light of the energy crystals to find the entrance to the vault. They fumbled their way down the spiral staircase. Halfway to the depths, they triggered an array. It shielded the vault at the bottom from outsiders. Tristan hid Stephen and Zane in his shadow and permeated the array through the refraction and light. He tossed his miniature tower into the air, and it expanded to a height of 60 feet. Every weapon with an aura was drawn into the tower. Stephen wasn't as interested in the weapons as he had been the first time he was here. The weapons in the Elysian realm were of higher quality. The only items he was looking for were jewelry to sell at a store. The carvings on the walls flashed, and a group of armored guards surrounded them. Stephen and Zane went to the corner and looked at Tristan. "You've emptied half of the vault," Stephen called out to him. "The least you could do is take care of the guards." Tristan put his plundering on hold and turned around with an annoyed look on his face. When the guards charged at him, he grabbed their weapons with his bare hands and covered them in shadows. Their weapons turned black and disintegrated into particles. They were absorbed into the shadows. Tristan dashed between the guards and landed a clean hit on their chests in quick succession. Their bodies shattered into glass fragments and scattered over the floor. They weren't living beings, so their bodies didn't have blood. The vault remained clean even after they were destroyed. "They're a lot weaker than the Ascenders and the Guardian Beasts," Tristan commented, dusting his hands. "Maybe it's because your cultivation improved," Stephen said. "Don't try to flatter me. I've lost my original body. There are limits to my cultivation." Tristan spotted dark red stones among the debris on the floor. They were in the shape of a heart. Faint threads of spiritual energy were wrapped around them. It was connecting to something in the depths of the vaults. The three of them picked up the stones and mounted the threadworms. They burrowed through the hardest layer of rocks with ease. Their teeth were made for digging tunnels. As they went deeper, the threads became clearer. The threadworms crushed the stone wall and dug out a lifelike stone statue. It was covered in mud and looked no different from junk buried in the soil, but the aura it emitted was real and intimidating. Stephen, Tristan, and Zane took a cautious step back. "Who's that? He's even stronger than the Ascenders in their portraits," Stephen said. "I think he's the founder of the martial arts faction who used to live on the island," Zane guessed. "I wonder which realm he ascended to." Tristan didn't care who he was, but he hoped he wouldn't show up and take the treasures back. They waited a full minute. When the statue didn't move, Tristan gathered his courage and went up to the statue to inspect it. The threads from the heart-shaped stones converged into the stone. He infused his mental energy into the statue, and knowledge of everything on the island flowed into his mind, including the hidden arrays. It was the right call to search the vault, although I don't get why the founder created this statue to store a map of the island. Was it because the members of his faction couldn't remember all the arrays they set up? Their memories must have been terrible. "How much energy is left in the arrays?" Stephen asked. "The arrays derive their energy from mines at the depths of the island that haven't been excavated. There's enough energy to keep them going for thousands of years." Tristan took out the weapons with the strongest aura he'd stolen from the vault and inserted them into a rock on the island's beach. He joined Stephen and Zane in the whale's stomach and waited for Thorin to show up. The school of fish searched the vicinity for any sign of the salamander. Stephen wasn't sure their plan was going to work. "How do you know Thorin's going to come?" "The more powerful a beast is, the more energy it needs to sustain itself," Tristan said. "It's easy to find ores on land, but there aren't too many energy-rich resources this deep in the ocean. The salamanders will come when it senses the energy on the beach." The waiting game began, but it was hard to tell who had the upper hand. The salamander had been riding in a narrow trench for half a day. Thorin and Dylus's patience was running out. They couldn't get in contact with Hashan from down here. "There's probably nothing to worry about," Dylus said. "Hashan's martial artists are more skilled than they let on. Their martial arts were made for assassinations." "Sounds like they're cowards to me. I heard their team in the martial arts competition lost to one of your fellow cardinals." Thorin didn't see the island state's martial artists as a threat. Their regime was constantly changing, and their martial arts were stolen from ancient factions in other centuries. They combined them and made their improvements and made it seem like they were their own. He was only working with Hashan to kill Stephen and his companions. After he reached his goal, he was planning on leaving the human realm. Thorin had an ancient jade pendant that had been passed down from generation to generation in Tempest Citadel. It could suppress a martial artist's cultivation. Once he deactivated it, his cultivation would be high enough to trigger the trial from the heavens. The salamander was getting hungry after spending hours in the ocean. It sensed a large amount of energy in the depths and subconsciously swam in that direction. Thorin assumed the energy was coming from the items on a ship that sank to the bottom of the sea. It wouldn't hurt to take a look. The fish spotted the salamander as it passed by and transmitted their location to Stephen. He was prepared for a battle with Tristan and Zane. Their weapons embedded in the rocks on Phantasma Isle Beach shone brightly in the darkness of the seabed. They were easy to find. Thorin and Dylus left the salamander's stomach to investigate them up close. "The craftsmanship is exquisite. They're treasures from an ancient martial arts faction, but I don't see any markings. I can't tell which faction they're from. We have no use for them. Might as well use them as food." Thorin pulled out the weapons and tossed them to the salamander. It dissolved the metal with its corrosive mucus and absorbed the energy. The salamander was still hungry. It started digging holes in the sand with its tongue to search for other sources of energy. If it kept digging, it would find the vault in the depths. Tristan activated the array, and a glass dome covered the island. Dylas looked up in alarm. "What's going on? There's an array this deep in the ocean?" "Calm down," Thorin said. "It might just be an array of an ancient faction left behind." They infused their inner energy into their swords and threw out their blades of light at the dome. The salamander spat out a ball of its corrosive mucus. The dome flickered and dispersed their attacks. Stephen, Tristan, and Zane leaped out of the water with their weapons in hand. "There's nowhere left to run," Stephen said, leveling them with a glare. Thorin grinned. "It's only been a day since we last saw each other. You've become a lot more arrogant. You haven't even reached the true immortal realm. What makes you think you can go against me?" His gaze flickered to Tristan and Zane. "Oh, I get it. You're confident because your underlings are with you." Dylas didn't care for provocations. He made the first move. His strikes were fast and powerful. Each swing of his sword released a violent wave of energy that evaporated the seawater when it hit. Stephen dodged and targeted Dylas's joints with his sword. Dylas was wearing a special uniform with enhanced defensive properties. Stephen couldn't penetrate it, but the aura from his sword seeped through the fabric and invaded his meridians. Dylas staggered back as the sensation of needles pricking his blood vessels washed over him. "They say you're the strongest martial artist in the U.S. You live up to the rumors. Even my uniform couldn't block your sword completely." "I suggest you surrender," Stephen said. "If you follow Thorin, the only ending waiting for you is death." "I'm not following him," Dylas spat. "You're the only one I want to kill." He created 3 identical clones of himself and attacked Stephen together. The threadworms condensed warriors made of sand to even out the numbers. Thorin, who'd been watching the fight unfold, finally made his move. He lunged for Stephen, aiming for his neck. When he was 10 steps away, he stopped abruptly. Tristan's shadow rooted him in place. Lightning cracked as Zane threw out his fist. Thorin drew a circle around him with the tip of his sword, and flames lit up the beach, dispersing Tristan's shadows. When he was freed, he leapt back and narrowly avoided Zane's fist. A flare of electricity brushed past him. Thorin ignored them and continued to target Stephen. Behind him, the salamander swept its tongue towards Tristan and Zane. Its mucus dripped onto the sand, and its pungent smell filled the air. As the battle escalated, Tristan secretly activated another one of the island's arrays. A bright red light covered the beach. When it subsided, a phoenix of fire took its place. It was hard to tell if it was a phantom of it or if it was a real body, but one thing was for sure. It was one of the faction's divine guardian beasts. The salamander cautiously turned its attention from Tristan and Zane to the phoenix. Thorin was confused as to why it was stopping attacking. "What's the matter? Don't tell me you're not confident in taking down that bird." "There's a hierarchy amongst beasts, and there's a natural suppression between tiers. The fire phoenix is called the undying bird in legends. No one has ever destroyed it before." They didn't have time to discuss countermeasures. Their conversation was cut short when the phoenix dove for the salamander, leaving a cascade of light in its wake. The light shattered and fell over the beach as sharp projectiles. The salamander barely managed to defend itself by relying on its sturdy skin. The ice dragon and flood dragon, who were hiding not too far away, condensed a white and black whirlwind that crashed into the salamander from opposite sides. It couldn't break free from the raging winds. Even its venom had swept into a storm and vaporized it into steam. The stone statue in the depths surged with the aura as another array was activated. The entire island shook. Golden pillars of light shot into the sky. Symbols in an ancient language swirled around them. Aside from Tristan, everyone else's inner energy seeped out of their body and was absorbed into the light. Stephen leaned over to Tristan and whispered, "Can you aim before you activate the statue? Are you trying to get all of us killed?" Tristan was the only one who wasn't affected because he was controlling the statue. The arrays were set up to protect the faction. We're all intruders. It can't be helped that we're all affected by the arrays too. The advantage shifted to the threadworms. They'd devoured tons of energy-rich ores and crystals. Even though some of its energy was absorbed into the light, it didn't have much of an impact on its high defenses. The threadworms flicked their tails at Thorin and Dylas. They blocked with their swords, but no matter how sharp their weapons were, they couldn't penetrate the threadworms' scales. The salamander lashed out at the nearest pillar of light with its tongue. A sizzling sound echoed through the beach when it made contact. The skin on its tongue was burnt black. As the salamander writhed in pain, the phoenix dove for the ground with its claws outstretched. It left bloody gashes on the salamander's skin, and the heat from the flames seeped into its body, turning its fluids into smoke. The salamander urged Thorin and Dylus to wrap up the fight quickly. Thorin's spiritual energy was linked to the salamander. He could feel the injuries it had sustained, but even if he wanted to end the battle, he couldn't. He missed every time he targeted Stephen. His space-time techniques were limited to a certain range. All Stephen had to do was step out of range to avoid its interference completely. Dylus reached into his pocket. I have another weapon, but you two will have to protect yourselves. Why didn't you take it out earlier? Thorin asked impatiently. Because the island's sealed. If I use it, we'll all die together. Dylus pulled out a handful of talismans. Stephen recognized them with one look and put some distance between them. He'd experienced their destructive effect many times in battle. Tristan was focused on maintaining the arrays. He couldn't steal the talismans right now. Zane condensed a spear of lightning. An explosion of thunder and electricity crashed into Dylus' shield of talismans. Its power was instantly absorbed. Stephen realized who Dylus was. He was a member of the Tribulation sect, and judging from the burn scars on his face, he had survived the missile that struck the crater. Stephen had an ominous feeling. The fight was turning out to be more complicated than he'd expected. On the other side of the beach, the salamander was locked in battle with the phoenix. Numerous flaming feathers engraved with complex runes were embedded in the salamander's skin. The sealing array prevented the salamander from circulating its energy through its meridians, and its body was about to enter a state of dormancy. The ice and flood dragons helped the phoenix and attacked from time to time. Use your talismans already, Thorin urged. If my divine guardian beast dies here, we'll be trapped on the island forever. Dylus didn't waste another second. He threw his talismans into the air and they shot towards Stephen's position. Stephen, Tristan, and Zane dashed behind a pillar of light, and the threadworms condensed a wall of iron sand around them. Stephen transmitted his voice to the ice dragon. Drop artillery shells on them! Are you sure? The island is sealed off from the ocean. The shockwaves from the explosion will bounce back and force and crush everything in between. The talismans are going to do the same thing. At this point, it's either we die or they die. It's a test of our defenses. The moment the ice dragon dropped the artillery shells, Stephen summoned the threadworms and the two dragons back to his spiritual world. When the talisman struck the wall of iron sand, the artillery shells landed on Thorin and Dylus at the same time. Two equally powerful explosions rocked the island. The flames swept the darkness of the ocean aside as sand and dust were thrown against the glass dome. The wall of iron sand was destroyed upon collision, but the particles remained in the air and lessened the impact from the shockwaves. The explosions knocked Stephen and Zane out cold. Tristan was the only one left standing. He'd used his two-dimensional shadow to protect his vitals and absorb the impact. He was maintaining the island's arrays, so he couldn't use his techniques to their full extent. Tristan splashed water on Stephen's face. Hey, wake up. Now's not the time to pass out. Stephen pushed himself up and wiped the blood from his mouth. He had a splitting headache, and his ears were ringing. You could have just called my name, you know. As Stephen's vision and the fog in his brain cleared, he realized that Zane hadn't said a word. He looked over at him lying on his side. His eyes were closed, and he was deathly still. Panic welled up in Stephen's chest. He reached over and shook him gently. Zane? Calm down, Tristan said. He'll be fine. It'll take a few minutes for his healing to kick in. As if on cue, Zane stirred and sat up in a daze. Why do we always end up getting caught in an explosion in every fight? The Phoenix had taken the explosion head-on and survived the shockwaves unscathed. Dylus wasn't as lucky. He'd sustained severe internal injuries, and there were patches of burned skin all over his body. Thorin had relied on his expert swordsmanship to create a weak spatial fluctuation to offset the explosion's shockwaves. As for the salamander, its energy was sealed, and it couldn't change its size at will. It was left with no choice but to withstand the explosion with its defenses alone. But the ice dragon didn't just drop artillery shells on Thorin and Dylus. Its aim was pinpoint accurate. Right before Stephen summoned the ice dragon back to his spiritual world, it had thrown a few artillery shells into the salamander's mouth. It burst into a rain of flesh and blood.